So Patty, today I loved our interview with Charge Sentry. Chargebacks has been such a big issue in our industry, and it seems like we're getting really close to just having it solved. You know what I mean? That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, and the thing is that what I really liked about these guys is that it sort of like dummies down the chargeback rebuttal process, so that almost anybody can handle it.
Well, that's what it is. I feel like it's that small business solution that's been kind of missing in the market.
The market's been missing. You had a great question from the field, James.
Thank you. Yes, I went out and closed the sale, dual pricing. Had a lot of conversations, but I wanted to go through the entire process as I've been working on a lot of content. And so I just talk about the keys to success there. Because it's still possible, and in my instance, easy, really to go out and sell payment processing. I mean, you're going to get rejection, of course, in any sales position, but I talk about that. And then Patty gave us a little bit of a data dump today, so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've just giving you some insights on top of wallet considerations and on where rewards cards stand. I think people will find some really interesting insights there. Awesome. And of course, this episode is brought to you by Valor Paytech, ccsalespro.com/Valor. If you haven't been there already, check it out.
Here we go.
Let's go.
Welcome to the Merchant Sales Podcast.
Hey, everybody. We are here today with Jack Shannon. He is the founder and CEO of Charge Sentry. How you doing today, Jack?
Good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Really excited about the technology that you're working on at Charge Sentry. We're talking about chargebacks and really automating this process that's been kind of an annoying pain point for merchants and for ISOs for that matter. So we're going to dive into that. But before we do, Jack, I always love to hear the story. So how did you end up in this crazy industry? And then how did you end up starting Charge Sentry?
Sure. Well, James, thanks for having me on. I'm glad that we got time to connect. Chargebacks have been a real pain for my entire career, to be totally honest with you. When I worked at companies, had to deal with chargebacks in one way or another. I owned an e-commerce company for about 14 years. And at our peak, we were getting about 150 chargebacks a month. And it was a really, to be honest, it was a really tough time in my life, dealing with the chargebacks, in some cases losing merchant accounts.
Right.
And it was just, and obviously painful for the revenue loss. And so we had, hired a few people to, respond to the chargebacks. Their full-time job, 150 chargebacks a month, it was their full-time job to, collect information, compile a chargeback response, and then send it off to the processor. And, they were doing a fine job, but we were, barely winning around 20%. To be honest with you, we were really just doing it to do our best to, manage the health of our merchant accounts. And, I just thought there has to be a better way. And so, back then we, created what now has evolved into Charge Sentry, or basically a system that would collect all the chargeback details, all the customer details, all the original transaction information, ingest it into our database, enrich that information with additional data to, facilitate, additional fact-based data that we provide to the processor, compile a meaningful, logically oriented chargeback response, and then automatically send it out to the processor. Well, when we did this, it was at that moment, it was really a test to see, what it would do. And we went from winning about 20% of our chargebacks to over 60% of our chargebacks. And we were able to reallocate those employees to other tasks within the company. Sure. And so the improvement in cash flow and the time managing, that whole process was practically eliminated. And so we definitely thought we were onto something, and that really helped us all the way through that company.
Very cool. I mean, I love it when somebody starts out, based on their personal experience, because there's so much momentum there. There's, you're trying to solve your own problem, and in the process solving other people's problems.
Right. Yeah. Well, we looked at other chargeback solutions on the market, and they were all okay, but for us at the time they were just prohibitive in whether it was like a long contract or a large monthly minimum, or the level of integration that we had to dedicate to getting integrated with those companies. And yes, it would have helped us. And we did try out a couple, but we never had any significant improvement in results. And at the end of the day, we still had to do something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you give us a sense for how bad of a problem chargebacks were for you. I'm wondering if you can extrapolate that at all out to the industry as a whole. You know, how big of a problem is chargebacks? Do you have any stats or some trend data that you can share with us?
I do. So I actually recently exited out of a payment facilitator. I had a payment facilitator for a few years. And so I'm intimately aware from the merchant side and from the processors and when it relates to chargebacks. So for small and medium-sized merchants, if you look at that segment of the market, over 60% of these merchants are not responding to their chargebacks.
Wow.
They usually, and that's a global number, and that 60%, the metric that I was able to find on that is a number that's aggregate across the spectrum of merchant size, right? So if you look at just the small and medium-sized merchants, not the enterprise customers, not the Amazons of the world and so on, that number is probably going to be in the 80-90% that never respond, or they try to respond and they lose and they get they just don't try again because they just think it's not worth their time.
So is that it? Is that the major pain point then, that they just don't think it's worth the time? Is it that they don't understand the problem full enough? Well, how are, I mean, the sense I'm getting is that the way most merchants are dealing with chargebacks is not dealing with chargebacks. Is that what you're saying?
That is true, right? So if you're looking at, let's take, for example, a smaller merchant that gets, I don't know, let's say 5 chargebacks a month, right? This company is probably, not Amazon size or even anywhere near that. And so they just, write it off as a cost of doing business. They usually do that because it's a smaller company, so they probably have less staff or resources to be able to respond to them. They probably don't know how to properly respond to a chargeback. They may look for templates online, things like that, and that only goes so far. And then when they add in the cost of the time that they have to invest to respond to every chargeback, it's just not worth it for them. And especially for merchants that are within reasonable risk levels for the processor, right? So let's say, for example, if they're under the magic 1% rule, they get 5 chargebacks. Well, cost of doing business, rather than attempting to recover that revenue.
Yeah. Does it have just, if you don't mind, James? I know you have a question, but I just wanted to ask Jack one thing. Does it also have? I mean, I would think that it has a lot to do with the size of the average ticket as well, right? I mean, if your average ticket is $50 and you're getting 5 chargebacks, but if your average ticket is $500, I would think that you're going to take, those industries would take a little bit of a closer look at this. Am I correct in assuming that?
I would agree with that. I mean, right. If someone has average ticket of, $5, $10, it may not be worth it. Someone that's getting, a higher ticket, where it's, in the multiple hundreds or even thousands, or even potentially tens of thousands, obviously, that hurts a lot more. But it's all relative to their, gross processing, right? So if someone's processing, $100 million a month and they get, 3 chargebacks for, $10,000 each, well, it's a larger company. It has a lot more, margin there, hopefully. And so they in some cases, they still write those off.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I like the interesting thing to me about this, I hadn't really thought about it, is that, it sounds to me like one of the things you're saying about Charge Sentry is that, we've interviewed other companies that provide some chargeback services, but you're right that most of them are kind of saying, well, this is for your larger merchants. This is for kind of your enterprise accounts and, people that get a lot of chargebacks. I think what I hear you saying is that Charge Sentry, is also servicing kind of these small to medium merchants that need a kind of an automated system to deal with their chargebacks as well. Is that part of this?
That is true. So, we work with the entire range of merchant sizes, anywhere from, some of the processes, $1,000 a month to people that process, multiple millions of dollars a month, or even higher than that. Sure. But our target audience, compared to, the other service providers in the industry, we target the small and medium-sized merchant, and which is, highly neglected in the industry.
Right.
And that's really because, they don't have the same kind of purchasing power the larger companies
Right.
do. So maybe they're just, not worth, for lack of a better word, not worth the time of these other providers. And the needs of these small and medium-sized merchants are far different than, the enterprise level. These smaller merchants have likely less staff, likely less time to do, kind of general operational work like responding to chargebacks. And so we found that, an automated service like this, where it's, arguably set and forget, is something ideal for those size merchants.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay, so let's dive into Charge Sentry a little bit. So tell our audience, like, what exactly does Charge Sentry do? Like, how does this work? What exactly are you doing to help these small and medium merchants automate their chargeback response?
Sure. So we differentiate ourselves tremendously from, the bigger players in the industry. The other players usually are requiring a 1-year contract, usually have pricing start at a monthly minimum of around $1,000 a month, usually require full integration to get their full suite of services. And in many cases, at the end of the day, still require that merchants do something when they get a chargeback. They make it easier, of course.
Right.
And these companies are fine, but they're not fully automated, and they heavily rely on the merchant's data to respond to the chargebacks. So we take a completely different approach. We don't have a long-term contract. Our merchants can sign up for month to month if they choose. Our pricing starts at $99 a month, and we also have a pay-as-you-go plan for merchants that maybe get one chargeback every few months. So it doesn't make sense for them to set up a subscription. We collect all the chargeback data, customer data, transaction data automatically. We enrich that information with additional fact-based data to what we call triangulation of the customer and the transaction. So we can prove to the issuing bank that the customer was aware of the transaction, and they say they are who they say they were, and we automatically respond back to the processor on the merchant's behalf. We also realize that some merchants will have unique information about the customer transaction, things like that. And we allow them to upload additional evidence if they choose. They don't have to do that. That's not mandatory. And we obviously check. We constantly are checking to see when we get a response back from the processor on that chargeback. And we back all this up with a money back guarantee, which is a first in the industry, where if we don't win the merchant the value of their subscription with us, they get their money back. So, it's really no risk to the merchant to use our service.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Okay, so I want to dive in a little bit. And one thing that really struck me about Charge Sentry was just like kind of how easy it is to get started. When you visit the website, again, we keep kind of contrasting here because there's a lot of other really good companies in this space. But again, when you go there, you kind of get the feeling like this is kind of a corporate website where you're going to reach out and talk to somebody. Yours is kind of more that feel of like, okay, cool, I just go sign up for this thing. This is neat. Talk about the sign up process. And I know that there is a little bit of, I would imagine, some maybe profile information or something that you would need to get from the merchant in order to respond. So talk a little bit about that. How does a merchant actually get started with Charge Sentry?
Absolutely. So I've always been personally annoyed with, when you need to use a service, you have to contact the salesperson and negotiate rates and terms and, whatnot, sign an agreement. And that could take, depending on your schedule, the salesperson's schedule, it could take a week, if not longer, depending on how unique the relationship is. And so we took a totally different approach. We took, the SaaS model approach, where basically you go to a website, you fill in a few details, and you sign up. And so our process is very easy for merchants. And again, this goes in line with the target market that we're focused on. So you go to our website, name, email, password, you're in the system. Once you verify your email address, you go through our boarding process, you select your processor, you select your delivery method. So for example, if you're selling some online subscription, it would be a digital service. Whereas if you're shipping something to the customer, then it would be, a shipped product or what have you. And then you choose a package that, fits your needs. And now you're in the system. Then once you're in the system, you would have to provide us some basic detail about your merchant account. And then That's it. And then the rest, our system does automatically for the merchants. And then we notify them if there's a new chargeback. We notify them if they won or lost, things like that.
And so obviously, in order to accomplish all of that, you're going to be getting this data, I guess, from the processor. And so, our audience represents a large kind of variation of, different processors they work with. So talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you, I'm assuming you're grabbing all this automatically from the processor. So do you have a lot of integrations? Like, give our audience a little bit of a flavor of kind of how that works.
Absolutely. So we have many integrations with a lot of the top processors in the world: Stripe, PayPal, Shopify, Braintree. And, that's just off the top of my head. We have many. I mean, we have hundreds of different integrations with processors. There are a few that, require some manual work on our end. But, it's some of the smaller processors relative to, the industry.
Got it. Okay. It makes sense. That's awesome. So basically, let me I just want to, and I like to do this sometimes in the podcast, just kind of restate to make sure I'm understanding it. Because if I'm understanding it, I feel like the audience is getting it. So basically what's happening here is a merchant's coming to, the website or some kind of custom link that you would set up for the ISO or the agent, and they're signing up for this service. They're putting in some information about their company. So you have the information you need to respond to future chargebacks. Then they are kind of linking their merchant account with the processor to your service. Then what happens is the processor is going to, reach out of, hey, there's a chargeback. That's going to notify your system. Then your system's going to go reach out and, get through the APIs and stuff with the processor, grab whatever data you need about that specific transaction. You're going to put all of that together with the merchant information you've already got, and your system is going to, compile all of that and then automatically generate this chargeback response. And then you're going to monitor the results of that, dispute, and then display that to the merchant. Did I get it right?
Yeah,
Is that about right?
Yeah, that's pretty much. We actually don't rely on the processor to notify us if there's a chargeback. So our system is constantly checking the merchant's account if there are any new chargebacks, and so we immediately collect that. So we try to collect that as soon as a chargeback happens, or as soon as a chargeback enters the processor's system. And so that gives us time to, collect additional information on that transaction, on that customer, and so on, as well as giving the opportunity to the merchant to, supply any additional evidence if they have it, if they choose to do that.
Got it. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. That's nice. Yeah. So they can actually jump in. Maybe they have a purchase order or something like that they want to submit as well.
We also have integration for different packages. We also have integration currently with Gmail and Zendesk. So we know that a lot of merchants will use Gmail or Zendesk for customer service. And so they can connect their Gmail and Zendesk accounts directly to ChargeSentry. And when a chargeback happens, what we'll do is we'll connect to those services, find any communications that they had with that customer, and then include that with the chargeback. And again, this is one additional evidence that helps win those chargebacks.
Yeah, that's great.
I love it. Okay, so I totally understand kind of this direct to merchant model. Let's talk about the ISOs and agents for a second. What is this a revenue opportunity for the ISOs and agents? Is this something that they can make money on, or is it just purely about kind of efficiency? Like how does it work with the ISOs and agents?
Absolutely. So there's a few aspects when it comes to our partners. And when I say partners, it's not just ISOs and agents. We also work with payment facilitators. We also work with e-commerce service providers, the WooCommerces of the world and whatnot. And so, yes, absolutely, it does generate revenue for our partners. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And then what we do is it's our integration with our process, with our partners is not necessarily just a referral link. We could do that, of course. Sure. Or we could, we work with each individual partner to find the best solution that fits their business flow, right? So that could be a simple referral link, that could be a full integration, it could be a full white labeled solution. So to their merchants, arguably they don't even know what ChargeSentry is. It's just that relationship with their processor. As far as revenue, we approach every relationship uniquely. We understand that every partner of ours has, different revenue goals, different metrics related to their merchants, and so we approach that differently. We are very liberal when it comes to, like a Schedule A, for lack of a better term, and we want everyone to succeed.
Yeah.
The more money our partners make, the more money we make. And so we definitely do that. And then for the partners, it's not necessarily just about the revenue. That's obviously an important aspect of it, but it relates to a lot of other things. One, they're giving a lot more value to their merchants. So by giving more value to their merchants, they can help reduce attrition of those merchants. Two, the merchant is going to be happy because they're going to be recovering revenue practically automatically. And the happier they are, the more likely they are to stay with that partner. From the partner's end, especially ones that hold risk, seeing chargeback responses is one element on how processors manage risk. Right? If a processor isn't getting a chargeback response from any chargebacks from a merchant, that could raise red flags, possibly get that merchant terminated. And so respond to those chargebacks, one, helps with transparency of that merchant, and then two, helps manage risk and hopefully not having to terminate that merchant in those risk cases.
I love it. I think it's super interesting what you're doing. I think our industry spends a lot more time and money on this than I think they even realize, meaning the ISOs and agents. It's a really annoying thing. I mean, I remember when I was selling full time that, it was very, very common, even with, I sold almost entirely low risk, merchants. And even with them, it was very common for me to get merchants to reach out. Hey, I got a chargeback. What should I do? And I'm like, oh, here we go again, and it's just annoying. Even if they only get 1 or 2 a month, it's still frustrating. So I know a lot in our audience, ISOs and agents, they're going to want to reach out, learn more about what you're doing. Where would you send them to learn more, Jack?
You could just go to our chargecentury.com and click on in the footer, we have a link to our partner program. And or you can just go to chargecentury.com/partners and you can read all about the service, and you could email us at partners@chargecentury.com. And someone will reach out to you as soon as possible and help you.
And that name again, so it's the website address is charge, and then it's centry.com, right?
Correct. Okay. Yeah. Charge Century, like a Century Guard.
Yes. Right. Not Century. So
guarding your
yes, not Century.
Yes.
That's correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. Jack, such great information. I really appreciate taking time today to share these insights with us.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, guys.
Thanks.
So Patty, real quick today, as we talk about our sponsor, Valor Paytech, I just want to mention that they are fully stocked. I just got an email from them.
I just got that email myself. Yes.
And I had just talked to Eric. And I mean, this seems like a small thing, but it's really not for anybody that's been in the business the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Finding terminals in general, forget good, just finding terminals has been really hard. Finding good terminals has been, really challenging. Valor Paytech, now they have done so much work behind the scenes to secure their supply of chips and things like that.
Right.
They now are fully stocked. They're getting all their shipments. And so if you're looking for a consistent provider of terminal hardware, and we're talking not just terminals, I mean, the mobile swipers, their little rocket that they have all this really cool stuff.
They have some very cool things. Yeah. And of course, online
gateway.
Being an omni-channel gateway is really important. So
sure.
If you haven't already, please go to ccsalespro.com/Valor. If you haven't gotten a demonstration, check it out. Send them an email. They'll be happy to demo for you.
And now, here is questions from the field with James Shepard.
So Patty, today in the questions from the field, I want to talk about one thing that really stood out to me. Last week, I went out in the field. I sold a dual price merchant with a Valor terminal, of course. And making that sale and having a lot of other conversations with merchants, with other sales that, I'm sure I'll be, getting in the portfolio here shortly. It's been a little while since I was out all by myself. I do a lot of consulting type stuff, but for me to be all by myself, walking out there, talking to merchants,
which is what you love to do.
I do love to do. I really do. It was pouring rain actually the day I shot a video. I'll put a video out about it, and it was pouring rain, and I still had a great time. But I'll tell you what stood out to me, and I don't know any way to say this without it sounding arrogant, so I'm just going to say it because it's true. It's like super easy, like the easiest thing ever, and to sell these merchants. And the reason that it's super easy is because I'm an expert and because I'm super confident.
Right.
And I think it is a mistake to ignore the expertise and the confidence level. I think our industry in a lot of ways really makes an uphill battle for agents because they kind of have this idea of give the agents the information that they need in order to just get out there and take action. And some agents respond well to that. Some agents are kind of, you have the steak and you have the sizzle. Some agents are better at selling the sizzle than they are the steak.
Right.
And that's fine, right? For them, they don't want to get overwhelmed. But I think it's a mistake to put everybody in that box. Understand there are salespeople like me. When I get into this industry, all I did round the clock, I was out running my appointments, making my sales. But I mean, evenings, mornings, I was researching the industry. And I was wanting to understand everything about it. And that's why today, when I go have these conversations with a merchant, I know for a fact that like me standing there talking to this merchant is going to be a benefit to them.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to add value to their business. I know that I am. I'm not wondering about it. I'm not worried that I'm going to get blindsided by something they say about payment processing that's going to confuse me. And so I think as a result of that, all I would say is if you're a salesperson and you're trying to sell payment processing and you are struggling to do that, again, it's sales. I don't want to make it sound like everybody I talk to is like, oh, please sign me up. No, I mean, I sold one. I'm not saying everybody I talk to, right? I'll probably sell 3 more out of my day of prospecting. But I mean, it's like I sold everybody. Definitely a lot of people were like, no, they're not interested. But that's sales. I mean, anybody that expects anything different doesn't understand sales. That's sales. I mean, no matter how good you are. But what's interesting to me is just that's water off a duck's back to me. I mean, I could care less, like, hey, have a great day. I'm on to the next one. But the idea is if you're having a real struggle and you're prospecting full time, how well do you really know this industry? How confident are you that what you're offering is the right solution for the merchant? And I made a mistake one time in my career in this industry when cash discounting first came out, that I didn't really believe in it before I went to try and sell it. The dual pricing, I had actually just finished writing this huge ebook that I'm going to release next week on dual pricing, compliance, all this stuff. So I was like, I'm all in. Like I'm all in on it. I believe it's the right thing to do. And it was fantastic. I went out and had a great conversation with several merchants, one that I was able to close on the spot with I came back the next day, but with the iPad there and everything. And it was a great experience. And the thing that stuck out to me was, my confidence level and my expertise in this industry still just make it so easy. And it's like I remember when I stopped selling full time and started my first ISO, and I was training these people. And I remember going out in the field with them and thinking to myself, how is it this hard for them? They would have somebody where they were like going down the wrong path and the person is clearly not going to buy. And I would just jump in and close the deal. And it was almost like, this is so easy. And I think, again, you have to have the expertise in the industry and you have to have a high personal self-confidence. That's just so important. And part of that also goes into the sales ability and the idea of perfecting your craft. I spent like years. I mean, I spent like a decade of my life, studying the common objections I would get, thinking about rebuttals, reading sales books, coming up with the right rebuttal to the right objection, thinking about my approach. And so all of that now is still like, I could you could wake me up in the middle of the night and ask me to pitch payment processing and I could do it.
Right.
And so I think that's really important. So again, not to sound arrogant about it, I want to point out that if you are struggling, you probably are not an expert, do you really understand interchange? Do you understand how payment processing really works? Do you understand the compliance issues related to surcharging if you're selling cash discounting or dual pricing or compliance surcharging or whatever? Do you know what a gateway is? Do you understand what an API is that can integrate payment processing? Do you understand how terminals work and what omni-channel means? And like, if you know that stuff, then you just come across as an expert and people just want to work with you. Not everybody, again, but the people who are possible to sell, they really want to work with you because they can tell you're the right person. So, get out there and get more confident by reading sales books
and expertise.
And you'll be happy you did.
Good stuff, James. Thanks.
This is the Insider's Report with Patty Murphy.
So, James, I haven't done a data dump in a while. And I thought I came upon some research recently by Fiserv. And, one of the things that it made clear to me is that despite this wave of new consumer payment options like buy now, pay later, credit and debit remain the preferred way of paying for most consumers. It's the preference held for all the payment situations Fiserv polled about 1,000 and some odd consumers.
Sure.
Credit and debit were the preferred for most situations. 75% said they want to use it in restaurants. Same for grocery stores. A little bit higher for sporting events and concert tickets. As expensive as those get these days, we know why.
Yep.
And not surprisingly, credit is the most preferred for purchases over $500, whether it's online or in person. Age, though, does play a role. And I thought this was worth noting. You know, seniors and boomers. I'm sure glad they don't call boomers seniors yet. Since I'm a boomer.
Right.
Are more inclined to use credit for large dollar purchases, while Gen Z prefers debit cards. And pretty much the same percentages, you know, about half and half, you know.
Interesting.
60% of the boomers like credit, 49% of Gen Z like debit. Interestingly, I found contactless payments have seemed to be losing their allure. Dropping in popularity from 37% in 2021 to 29% in terms of consumer perception of what's the fastest way to pay. Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. And the share of consumers saying contactless payments were the most convenient way to pay fell from 31% to 26%. Digital wallets are gaining, but consumers still don't want to give up their plastic, with about 43% saying they would opt to use, just 43% saying they would opt to use mobile debit rather than their cards. But here's the thing that really jumped out at me. Top of wallet considerations. 90% of consumers have a go-to card that they use most often. For most of those consumers, 71%, the go-to card is the one that offers the best rewards. Now, this is noteworthy to me because it's a big issue with merchants as they complain about interchange. It came up a lot in that hearing last week that Senator Durbin held. You know, the banks and Visa and MasterCard were saying if you regulate interchange, then rewards cards are going to go away. And the merchants are saying the rewards cards are the most expensive. We don't really want to deal with them, but we have to deal with them. So, you know, I think that's really interesting. And I think it's also interesting that among high income consumers, those that earn over 150K a year, 80% of them prefer using the rewards cards. Gen Z consumers are the outliers. Most of them carry just one credit card. Very interesting, since they're getting older and eventually going to be a larger share of the population, of the transaction population, so to speak.
Yeah, that's very interesting stuff. I mean, and it is a complex ecosystem. I feel like,
right.
A lot of times I'm so hard on Visa about different things, but I mean, at the end of the day, again, to clarify, I have no problem with interchange. I have no problem with rewards cards. I only have a problem if a free market doesn't exist on both sides.
Right.
Right. And so to me, it's true. Consumers, do want to use their rewards cards. They do like getting the rewards. That's what a big part of what drives that kind of network effect.
Right.
I believe merchants should have the ability to decide whether or not they want to absorb the cost or not. But I think that's super interesting. So,
and another thing that I think is super interesting, James, is that merchants complain a lot, and I'm not like condemning what they say, but they complain a lot about the cost of card acceptance. But more and more merchants are doing buy now, pay later. And what's the effect of interchange? And they don't call it interchange, but the fee they pay for that is much higher than the interchange fee.
Or what they would do for a DoorDash or Uber Eats or
correct.
Grubhub, and they're paying, it's like they're paying 20% interchange in a way, In
a way, yeah. So
and I think the reason is because the perception among merchants is that the card networks have matured to the point where it's unnecessary, in other words, but I think Visa certainly has an argument to be made there. But again, to me, ultimately, I'm a free market capitalist, and not that I think it's, you need a entirely free market with no regulation. Obviously regulation plays an important role, but my point is, I feel like it's fine to have, I think Visa should be able to, I think they should be able to offer a 5% cashback rewards card with 5% interchange. I mean, I'm fine with it. I just feel like as long as the merchant is able to see this information in real time and be able to pass it through to the consumer at their choice or to absorb it. Again, maybe they want to do something. To me, I actually feel like it's interesting to me because I actually think that Visa in a lot of ways could go in kind of the opposite direction of what they're going now, where I feel like right now the card brands in general are so much on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's interesting is what would it look like for them to go on the offense?
Right.
To me, going on the offense would look like different networks. And so I know they have some pieces of buy now, pay later, right? But I feel like, why don't they go on the offense and create the Visa buy now, pay later program specifically for merchants, and all of a sudden say, buy now, pay later programs are 8% or whatever. And all of a sudden, I think that would almost make it more clear to regulators to say, well, wait a second, what are you saying? Are you saying that, because I mean, ultimately capital has a cost.
Right.
And if you want us to deploy capital to help consumers and merchants exchange goods and services, there's a cost to that capital.
Right. Right.
And so again, I am not at all against that. The only thing I'm against is the idea that they should be able to make their own rules and all of that, but then they should also be able to limit the merchant from being able to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
As a result.
And what you say about the buy now, pay later, I would not be surprised to see Visa release some sort of buy now, pay later for the merchants.
They have a lot of investments in buy now, pay later.
A lot of investments in buy now, and so does MasterCard for that matter.
Right. And I just think it's interesting the way that they've approached it, because I feel like whether it's crypto, whether it's buy now, pay later, whatever it is, they seem to want to make a lot of behind the scenes investments in these companies as like almost a hedge against their own demise in some ways. But I think it's interesting that they aren't jumping out of the battlefield in these areas. They're more trying to kind of protect what they have.
In the background, kind of protecting things. Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, super interesting. I'll be very, very curious to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast. Whether you are an industry veteran, processing executive, or just trying to learn about the payment space, we appreciate your time. The Merchant Sales Podcast is a joint production of Greensheet.com and ccsalespro.com, and we hope you will tune in next week for more information and tips on building your merchant services business.